Are you ready? It is time for KMB Talk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of KMB Talk. I am your host, Kerry Michael Bennett, and I am so grateful that you are here with us today. Speaking of grateful, wow, the guest that we have, I am incredibly grateful. She was able to make some time to come on KMB Talk and talk about leadership and what she is seeing out there. Let's go ahead and get ready to introduce our guest. So let's set the stage. 18 years as a senior human resource professional and organizational development professional. Worked in nonprofit, Fortune 100 companies, you name it, Microsoft, Starbucks, Tribune Company, Whirlpool, Sears, Motorola. Currently serving as the Chief Human Resources Officer at YWCA Metro Chicago. Let's go ahead and bring our guest on the line, Dr. Tanjia Coleman. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Kerry?
Oh, I'm doing absolutely fantastic. It is a Monday morning, another opportunity to get out in the world and create success.
Absolutely.
Tanjia, do I call you Dr. Coleman? Do I call you Tanjia? What would you prefer?
Tanjia is absolutely fine.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you so much. And you can call me Kerry. How's that, right?
That sounds good.
Sounds good. Tanjia, thank you so much for joining us. So you are in, what is it, sunny Chicago. Is it sunny today?
It's actually not too bad. I'm not going to complain. It's not actually snowing. There's no real ice, so I'm in a happy place.
Okay. Happy place. Perfect for this phone call. Let me go ahead and tell you about an issue that I had with preparing for this call. Are you ready?
Sure.
There was so much information about Tanjia. So much information. Author, speaker, researcher, executive coach, champion of diversity, organizational culture expert. Goodness gracious, this really seems to be your passion, your life.
Yes, it is. I say every day that I am truly blessed to be able to do what I enjoy doing every day, what I'm actually passionate about in helping both people and organizations go from good to great and really realize their full potential. I think so many of us don't have people that are champions in our corner all the time that really see things in us that we don't see in ourselves and can pull that out and accelerate it to get you to greatness. And that's what I enjoy doing for individuals.
I love it. You know, one thing that I've seen, and I've spoken to this before, is maybe it's just me, but in my opinion, I'm seeing more and more of a very valid front and center discussion around the impact of culture on an organization. Is this something that you're seeing as well, or am I just now realizing that it's really taking center stage?
Yes, and organizations and leaders within organizations now are understanding the value of culture. And the culture is comprised of the people that's there. And for so many years, we both know this is true, that leaders would tend to focus on the outcomes of the revenue generation, of the number of sales, of all sorts of tangible results. Oftentimes, the people, the human capital in those conversations were forgotten or just were viewed as less important. But we all know a company doesn't exist without the people. And the better mind frame and space that the people are in, it translates into heightened and better performance, whatever that performance is for your organization. And so now organizations and leaders within organizations and even boards of directors are taking culture very seriously, taking engagement very seriously, and making substantive changes to impact those organizations in a very critical and positive way. And with those improvements, it's oftentimes rallied around the people. So you want to make sure that you have a culture that is one that resonates with success and people feeling like they're part of the organization, not disenfranchised, not disengaged, but actually part of the mission, that they're part of something bigger than just their job title and what they do every day, that what they do is a puzzle piece to a much larger puzzle. And without that puzzle piece, the puzzle isn't completed. And so we need every single person to make the puzzle to get to the results that we need to get to. And that's really the key behind building culture. It takes a while if you go into a situation where the culture has not been positive, or you have toxic individuals and leaders within the culture. It takes years to turn that around at times. But there is a methodology to it. There's a process around it. And I've certainly mapped that out, and it's won an international award for how do you really change the culture within an organization and shift it and have a multi-year plan by which to do that.
You know, excuse me, I'm very glad to hear you say multi-year. That I'm curious, in your experiences, how long, when an organization brings you in and says, Tanjia, here's what we're wanting to accomplish, and we're really having a culture dialogue, what expectations do you provide them on timing?
I think there's a lot of things that I call low-hanging fruit that organizations can do immediately to see results.
Okay.
But to really be able to see year over year sustainable results, it takes at least 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
So I would say have at least a 3 to 5 year strategic plan, knowing in the first year or two, you will see some positive movement and trajectory based on what some of the actions are that you take. But in order to see that momentum continue, like if you're engaging with an organization and doing an actual engagement survey, right? Your first year, you might have low participation and the engagement might be low. But then you want to look for improvement year over year. You'll probably get to where you really need to be if you're continuing the cycle of building a positive culture within 3 to 4 years.
So you come in, you do your baseline. Baseline's low. Not a problem. This is just a baseline. This is our starting point. You probably want the baseline to be a little low because that tells you truly we do have a problem, right?
Right.
Okay, so then from there, low-hanging fruit, we get some results on the board, get some wins. But as far as really turning the organization around from a cultural perspective, you're saying 3 to 4 years is really what the expectation should be.
Right, but oftentimes leaders expect for it to turn around within 90 days or 6 months, and they have created this negative culture probably over the past 10 years. So
right.
I kind of equate it to weight loss. So you
I was just
put
thinking,
your weight on over some years.
I was the holidays just passed.
Right. And you can't get it off in like a month. And so it takes a real dedicated regimen and schedule in order to work those extra pounds off. And it's no different than shifting a culture and increasing engagement.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever come across an instance where you, after your initial assessment, had to tell the organization, you're actually not prepared for the culture that you want, and I'm not sure that you can get there? Has it ever been that extreme?
Typically, when I come in, folks understand there needs to be a change and a shift.
Okay.
And so we're able to have that conversation. Now, to your point, part of that conversation is if you're not ready to make those shifts, whether it's regarding dealing with people who are toxic, ensuring folks have the right training and development to be successful, you're not willing to dedicate the time to really engage in what a cultural transformation is. That's really what I've coined it, because that's absolutely what it is. You're transforming a culture. And so if you're not willing to be dedicated to that, and also if you have key leaders that are engaged in those results, but you feel like they're not going to be with the organization very long, you want to have that conversation as well.
Okay.
Because part of building the trust of the employee base is that they have a sense of stability and connection with their leadership team. And I have seen this happen where people go down this road, leaders, and then that leader leaves. And then someone else comes in and they don't think it's important. They think enough has been done and they cut the activity. And so you actually have a worse scenario than you started with, because now people feel like you've wasted their time. You've had us fill out these engagement surveys. You told us you were coming through on some of these initiatives that we highlighted were issues for us. And now you're telling us that what we indicated doesn't matter and we don't matter.
So the internal
and
leader,
that can put us,
the internal leader that championed this departs, the whole program is now at risk.
It can be, yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, it makes sense. Excuse me. It really does make sense. And employees aren't really wanting to be told what to do. They're wanting to be inspired and influenced to do the right things.
Agreed. And that really kind of goes back to, this is the nerd part coming out,
okay,
to Doug McGregor's Theory Y and Theory X. So Theory X was people basically disliked work, they had little ambition, and you had to kind of put your foot on their neck to make sure that they got things done, and you had to do it in a way that was in a very much a dictatorship, right? You're in a position of authority, and you exhibited that, right? And then you wanted to exhibit it in a way where the other employees would see what was happening, and that level of authority and dictatorship would then make them not want to receive that same treatment. So it would make them maybe work faster, work harder, work without minimal disruption or breaks, and et cetera.
Okay.
And then you have the Theory Y perspective of, management style was very much collaborative, and you kind of work from the premise that people would do what they're supposed to do and didn't need a lot of self-direction because they knew what the objective was and they would get it done. And so as work has evolved and research has evolved around people motivation and what makes what it takes to retain an employee, what it takes to have loyalty from your team, it's really landed more on the Y theory of being collaborative, taking advice, having two-way feedback conversations, making sure individuals' voices are heard. And so just that piece is now what motivates employees to do better and organizations ultimately, right, having better outcomes, because most leaders, board of directors, shareholders care about the bottom line. And the better you treat your employees, the bottom line looks better.
I agree.
It's without argument. Every single research piece shows that if employee engagement is high, revenues tend to be high. And initially, when folks started the engagement initiative, it really wasn't called engagement. It was called employee satisfaction. And the reason we got more to engagement versus satisfaction is you can be very satisfied not doing a whole lot.
Oh, yeah, that good point. You know what? I'm just cruising through my workday. Give me the form. I am incredibly satisfied.
Right. But you're not engaged. You wouldn't recommend your friend or family member to work there. That's also a good gauge for organizations that have employee referral programs. How many of your hires are coming from employee referrals? Because when you refer your friend, your loved one, your family member to your place of employment, that is saying, I like it here, and I think you will too.
Right.
And if you don't like it, you're not going to recommend people that are close to you because you don't want to see them in a situation where they will be hurt or disengaged or unhappy.
Right. So to your point, leaders used to really have a results-based focus. And what we've seen is more of a focus on culture and organizational development. And as a result of that, results are improving.
And although I would say you have a scenario where individuals might not be staying with organizations as long as they used to, the average tenure is about 4 years. But in that 4 years, if you're getting the maximum amount of performance out of someone, that's really important. That's where the rubber hits the road. I tell people and leaders this all the time in the recruitment process. Just because someone has changed jobs does not mean that they have been ineffective. You can have someone who's sit in a job 10, 15 years and haven't made much of a difference. And you can have a person come into a role and in 2 years or a year make a tremendous amount of difference and traction for that organization. So I don't ever equate longevity with productivity and results.
I could actually argue to many, many folks that in some cases, longevity leads to a lack of performance. You become stagnant.
You absolutely, you can. And you become disenfranchised because oftentimes when you stay in an organization a really long time as well, you're only susceptible to a minimal amount of merit increase. And that's just the honest truth.
Right.
If you change and go to another organization where you might have more responsibility, more accountability, whether you're indirect, whether you have direct reports or not in a leadership position, you still might have a broader portfolio, which then would warrant a higher compensation package.
Right.
And so oftentimes I have to coach leaders on this, that sometimes people's job movements are strategic. And you have to look at the impact. Has that person gone into an organization? Have they won awards? Have they been thought leaders in their professional area of expertise? Do they actually have mentees? Are younger people and people new to a career, whether it's a career change or not, reaching out to this particular person because they view them as a thought leader? So oftentimes what I see is people who stay in positions a really, really, really long time tend to lose some of the traction in those areas. Now, of course, there's folks that stay at organizations for 20, 25 years and are always 100%, foot on the gas pedal.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But more often than not, you don't necessarily see that happen. Yeah. Unless too, you're seeing upward trajectory. You're seeing people who are moving up in the organization. So they may have been there 18 years, but they have progressive moves within that organization every few years. So in that instance, it's almost like they're starting a new job all the time. So they have an upward mobile trajectory. However, if someone's sitting in a role 15, 16 years, and they've only had 2 moves, that is something to be concerned about, even though the person might stay forever. Are they going to get you the outcomes and results that you need to then meet your strategic plan and the plan that the board of directors and the shareholders and the rest of the employee base are holding you accountable for delivering upon?
Wow. I mean, great point. Absolutely great point. Tanjia, let's shift gears just for a moment. I have a question for you.
Sure.
If you had on this phone call to define servant leadership, what would that definition be?
In simple terms, it's not about you.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Servant leadership is a topic that's coming up more and more often. And for those that have listened to the show before, I am a tremendous fan. Another question for you. Going through your media kit, I loved a phrase that I saw, and essentially it referenced your ability to discover blind spots in an organization. And it went to discuss, your certification and many, many types of assessment tools to help discover those. But let's talk about those blind spots for a moment. What are you seeing out in the landscape?
I see a lot of leaders aren't necessarily interpersonally aware of what their strengths and opportunities are. You have some that are hyper aware and they have coaches and they are actively developing themselves every single day. Those type of leaders you would pay $1 billion to have and report to, right? Fortunately for me, my CEO, Dory McWhorter at YWCA Metro Chicago, is one of those leaders. She is constantly evolving and on the public stage and bringing her message forward and just has a true passion around eliminating racism and empowering women every single day. And I was teasing her one time and I said, when do you actually sleep? And she said, when you have to eliminate racism and empower all women, there's no time to sleep.
There is no time. There is no time when you're. It's hard to believe that. It's hard to believe in 2019 that we still have so much inequality, but at the same token, there is so much excitement about the visibility that has and the actions and efforts of so many trying to rectify that. And here you are on the forefront of that. YMCA Metro Chicago, oldest, largest women's organization in the region.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes, we service over 200,000 families a year. We have 9 locations throughout the Chicagoland area, western suburban area and Chicagoland area,
as South suburban. One thing I really enjoyed seeing is, Chief Human Resource Officer. I see this for your role at the YMCA Metro Chicago. And then somewhere along the way, I see Chief Possibility Officer. And I love it. I absolutely love it. So is it fair to say that came from the CEO as well?
Yes, she's very inspirational. And she assigned all of her leadership team members, her chiefs, very interesting, inspiring titles that really make you go out into the world and feel like you're making a difference. So when you say you are a Chief Possibility Officer, not only does it generate a lot of interest, but people have a lot of questions, and then people see you in a positive light. However, sometimes folks don't quite connect the dots, so you have to revert back to, really, I'm running the human resources operation, right?
Right.
Which is very serious as well. But in intertwined in that, for me, has always been helping people reach their true potential and see the possibilities in themselves that they don't see. And no one has really encouraged them to see. And one of the things I talk a lot to leaders about is whatever trauma individuals have gone through as a child and have managed to still live productive lives, whatever that trauma is, if they may not have been able to reconcile, comes right into the workplace as they're an adult. So people's insecurities, people's sense of being afraid, people's lack of confidence, people feeling that they don't have a voice, that all comes with them at work every day. So we have to deal with not only what needs to happen from a work perspective, but also tap into that person's inner child to be able to bring out the best in them and to give them the confidence and the inspiration that they need to reach their full potential. And that's one of the things that I think makes me very unique as a leader, because I have a sense of seeing things in people they don't see in themselves and helping them elevate. And one of the things that I even posted on LinkedIn that I truly believe in is that the true test of a leader is not when they're in the organization holding their title, because everyone will show some level of respect to you if you're the vice president or you're the senior director or you are the CHRO. The true testament of your leadership, the effectiveness and impact of it, is if people 10 years later that either reported to you or worked in that organization reach out to you for guidance, advice, mentorship. that's when you know you've
Wow.
had an impact.
That
Because at that point, you no longer have the title. They no longer have to respect you at all.
right.
But they do because you left something behind that was really important, or you gave them some sense of inspiration that they remember, that became a part of who they were. And I get that all the time. People reach out to me that I hadn't spoken to in 10, 15 years for advice on a myriad of different things centered around their career or how to manage or coaching and things of that nature. And so I see a lot of leaders, walk with their chest puffed out in the office because they have these titles and people, have to respect them. But when they leave the organization, a lot of times people have very little respect for them unless they've really built that foundation with folks that it's not about me, it's not about my title, it's really about me helping you be your best self.
So if you are,
And
if you're a leader out there right now, and you're concerned that this might be the case upon your departure from the organization, 2 words: servant leadership. Focus on servant leadership. You actually still have time to correct. Is that fair?
it is, but it's not the full prescription. So I do think because some folks, they're not ready for servant leadership yet. They have to understand who they are
Oh,
first before they can serve others.
that's very interesting. Very valid. Okay, Tanja. So there's a gentleman that's a colleague of mine that I respect quite a bit, and when I let him know that I was had an upcoming opportunity to speak with you, he says, "Carrie, I've got one question. It's not something that's simple to answer. I don't expect a simple answer for the purpose of a phone call. However, will you please ask it anyway?" Tanja, how do you build culture in an organization that can endure both good and bad times?
Well, you have to first build the engagement of the team, and you have to then share what your vision, what your mission, and what your values are
Okay.
with your team
So
often. That
transparency.
communication has to be frequent, it has to be authentic, and it has to be transparent, and it has to resonate with the team members, and they have to feel that you have skin in the game, that you are dedicated to turning that tide around, and you're going to be there. They can count on you. That's how you get people to stick with you through tough times. And I can say one organization that did go through a tough time when I was there, and people were just loyal beyond anyone's notion of being loyal, and that was Starbucks. When I worked at Starbucks in 2007, they went through the first downsizing in the company's, at the time, the company's 26-year history.
Okay.
So it was tough times, but people just did not resign. They did
Wow.
not. They really believed in the message. They believed in our leader at the time. At the time, that was Howard Schultz,
Yep.
and they stayed.
That is
And when the company turned back around to where it is today, those folks that stayed, it paid off for them because they were able to purchase stocks and see those stock prices increase. And
right.
so their loyalty paid off financially, but also just from a career perspective.
Wow. What a story. Reimagine Organizational Development's an organization that you began. And I love it because basically what I see is, hey, I've got access to a Tanja via this organization. Cultural transformation, executive coaching, organization design, talent and leadership development. I really like the leadership development. I love it. And then I look at Kindercare and what you were able to help those folks with. I mean, completely disengaged, 20,000 employees. Subsequently, Gallup's top 37 companies to work for. Wow.
Yes, it was quite a challenge, but part of that was engaging in town halls and focus groups and really hearing the voice of our team members. And when we had several issues around the same topic, our leaders were quick to jump in and figure out how do we get to a resolution where everyone can celebrate a win-win scenario. And so from that vantage point, it was a wonderful organization to work for. The leaders there are wonderful. The people that I had to interact with on a day-to-day basis, just stellar, and actually came from other large organizations where they had made a positive impact as well. So it was a great experience for me in my career, and I'm still in communication with several individuals that are there today.
Well, Tanjia, I cannot thank you enough for making time to come on. Before we leave, something I really enjoy doing with a guest, Dr. Tanjia Coleman, you have an opportunity to provide advice for our listeners, our viewers, for anyone that you want. What advice do you have to give, and to whom are you giving it to?
Well, this is a sad note for sure, but here in Aurora, Illinois, we did have a situation, a workplace violence situation at Pratt Industries in Aurora. What was extremely sad about the situation is that the employee was being terminated. He brought in a gun with him and subsequently killed 5 individuals and shot many more. I want to say 10 individuals were impacted. 2 of the individuals that were victims of his violence happened to be in human resources. One, Clay Parks, because I think it's important to say victims' names to remember. Right. Clay Parks was the human resources manager, and Trevor Wiener, hope I'm saying his name right, was a human resources intern from Northern Illinois University. It was his first day on the job. His first day as an intern there. He was brought into the termination meeting where subsequently the violent episode took place.
Wow.
There's been a lot of reflection in the human resources community around this because it did happen during a termination conversation with an employee. And human resource professionals, many people who aren't in HR don't necessarily realize that HR people have to do this all the time. We don't make the decisions for the termination per se. We give guidance and counsel and coaching, but ultimately we support our leaders who have to make those decisions. So there's a few things that I think is really important, and I'm actually going to write on this as well. When you're communicating to individuals that are being terminated for whatever reason, whether it's a job elimination, whether it's gross misconduct, whether it's attendance, whatever it is, there's just a few things you have to remember when you're having these conversations. One of the things also that I noted that the CEO, Scott Hall, said is that if the belief is that someone may be violent, precautions are then taken. Well, that leaves a lot at the discretion of a manager and an HR manager who may or may not even really know this person, right? Most of the time when these things happen, what do you hear? You hear, I never thought that person would do that, or I'm completely surprised.
Right, closest
so I don't
fan, yeah.
There's a certain look that someone has that may tip you off that they may become violent, because oftentimes in these cases, the people that do exhibit this haven't necessarily exhibited violent tendencies at work in the workplace. When you peel the onion back, they might have some violent things that they've done outside of work, but you wouldn't be privy to that information. So I do think that just some standard safety precautions need to be in place when you're doing in-person terminations. So a few things that I work with my leaders on. One very important thing is I put together a script for all of my managers that have to engage in termination conversations.
Okay.
Because it is a very sensitive time for the employee, but it's also a sensitive time for you as the person that has to deliver and communicate this. And I've seen where leaders sometimes want to put their feet in the ground and defend their decision, and that defense can easily escalate to an all-out argument and debate. And that's not what you need. You, at the end of the day, you want the person to leave with respect and dignity and pride. And the decision has been made. There's no reason to argue about it. There's no reason to have a heated debate around it. But sometimes that's forgotten when you have these conversations. One of the reasons why I think it's important to have some type of script prepared so that you stay on script and you don't allow the person to pull you into an argument or down a path that you don't want to be in. Conversely,
where you inadvertently or accidentally escalate.
Absolutely. And there is no one is saying anyone has a right to come into an organization and exhibit workplace violence, to hurt anyone, to kill anyone. That is not the message, that there's any blame anywhere. But I do believe that there can be things that we actively think about and do to de-escalate and to keep the conversation civil. And another piece too is I always thank individuals for their service. I think that's important to
Gratitude, yes.
When someone's been an employee, right. And then the goal of the conversation really is to let people know that their dignity is intact. If you're not going to contest their unemployment benefits, say that. But if it's a reason like gross misconduct, some other reason where you would, then you can stay away from that. But if it's a situation where it's not going to be contested, you can just openly say, hey, I'm not going to contest this. Another thing that I try to always do for employees that are departing the organization is what I've coined as a soft landing, meaning there's some type of compensation provided so people don't feel like they're at their wit's end. You know, it is the end of the road. They're not going to be able to sustain themselves. It gives them a glimmer of hope. Now, people might balk at that, but the end result can be even worse. I also think that organizations and I don't want to throw a blanket statement out there, but a lot of organizations don't really take safety as seriously as they should. And even as the HR leader in an organization, sometimes when I would mention it, people would actually laugh like, oh my gosh, you're so paranoid. But not being paranoid can land in a very distasteful situation where you have a lot of people traumatized now. So I always err on the side of caution versus not. One of my what I feel is my number one priority is to make sure that my team members are safe. And if that means when you have termination conversations that you bring in a plainclothes security person to kind of monitor the outside, then that's what you do. It's not expensive. It's not an expensive investment that's going to hit the bottom line and cause you not to make your numbers that year. But it can make other individuals feel safe, and it can, if something does start to happen, you can rectify it really quickly because someone's right there on the premises.
Right.
So
a very justifiable expense for many reasons.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of organizations are going through the active shooter response training. I think that's important as well. But sometimes once an active shooter's in your place and there's no other security there, you're hiding under a desk, but if they come under there, you're still going to end up being a victim.
Right.
So I would prefer to have some type of security along with the active shooter training so that you can hopefully limit any continued trauma and injury to employees. So that's really, I'm going to write a little bit more in depth about it. It's really touched a nerve with a lot of my colleagues because this is what we engage in often.
You just, unless you're in the HR role, you don't think about this as often as you should. And Tanjia, I cannot thank you, just thank you so much for your time. And wow, what a message. I mean, it's right. It's real. National headlines very recently in your area, and I am very fortunate to have you on the line to provide some advice. I hope that our listeners, our viewers, regardless of the role they have at their organization, can listen to that and really escalate the dialogue. If the leaders aren't willing to talk about it, organized. I mean, your safety is absolutely mission critical and supersedes any business objective every time. So thank you for that advice. Tanjia, thank you for taking your time. Wow. Absolutely love your story, everything that you're doing. I look forward to supporting you as you continue. Hope to talk again soon because there's several other topics I would really like to talk to you about. So do you think I can get you to agree to come on sometime soon?
Absolutely. And I am going to be publishing soon a journal around diversity and inclusion.
Well,
yes, very exciting stuff.
Let me know when you're ready to come back on, and we will schedule. Tanjia, thank you so much. Listeners, viewers, thank you for joining another episode of KMB Talk. Until next time, thank you for listening to KMB Talk. You don't have to click home, but you can't stay here.